I hope this isn't like Between Two Ferns or anything.
No. All right, I guess the mic is working. I can hear myself. So, good afternoon and welcome. For those who don't know me, I'm Amalia Duarte. I am the chairwoman for Morris County Democrats. So thanks for coming out this afternoon. And I wanted to welcome my co-host, Sussex County Democratic Committee Woman Chair, Zoe Heath. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone who's come out today from Morris or Sussex, and a huge thank you to the Morris County Dems and their staff for putting today together. I'm so excited to be here. I know we're so excited to have everyone.
Awesome. So going to get through a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll launch into the questions. We're very excited to kick off what's the first in a series of town halls featuring all 6 of the Democratic candidates who are running for governor. The goal is to give our county committee members a chance to hear from everyone prior to our convention, which will happen toward the end of next month. And that's when we'll vote on making an endorsement. Our series continues next Saturday. We're going to have the mayors, Ross Baraka, Steve Fulop, and Sean Spiller. And then on Monday, February 10th, we're having a Zoom town hall with Congressman Josh Gottheimer and followed by Senator Steve Sweeney, and that will conclude the series. I know that's a lot. If you can't participate in all of them, they are being recorded, so you can watch them in the comfort of your kitchen. I just want to thank everybody for coming out today, especially our elected officials, our state committee members, municipal chair, county committee members, caucus leaders, and just a big thank you also to folks from outside of Morris and Sussex County who are here today. So again, give yourselves a round of applause. And I've got to do a couple of quick plugs. First off, Chairwoman Heath and I are always looking for candidates. So if you're interested in running for a local, county, or state office, we'd love to talk to you about that or getting involved with the campaign. Feel free to contact me, chair@morrisdems.org, or Chairwoman Heath at chair@sussexdems.com. We think it's so important to give voters a choice, even in some of our reddest towns. It's important that when they go to vote in the primary and in the general election, that there are Democrats on the ballot. So please consider putting your name down. One more plug. Where's John Hester? Somewhere. There he is. He's up there. He is our fabulous professional photographer who is here today, volunteering. And tomorrow we have the Art of Politics event. It's a free event. There's going to be wine, beer, cheese. I think Shay's putting together a charcuterie board from 3 to 5 o'clock at the Morris County office, 11 Washington Street in Morristown. Please stop by to see the amazing photos that John has. It's all set up, the exhibit. And to thank John for all the volunteer work that he does. All right, last thing, and then we'll get into the to hear from our Congresswoman. Like at the movies, please silence your cell phones. It should go without saying, no disruptions, please. Please be respectful of everybody who's given up their time today to be here. And with that, I'm going to do a very quick introduction for our Congresswoman. As we all know, most of you probably know already, she has been in public service nearly her entire life. She's a graduate of the Naval Academy, served in the Navy for 10 years as a helicopter pilot, went to Georgetown University, got her law degree, was in the U.S. Attorney's Office as a outreach and reentry coordinator, and then as an assistant U.S. attorney trying federal cases. In 2017, she decided to run for Congress in CD11, and she scared off the incumbent, Rodney Frelinghuysen, who dropped out. In 2018, she won the Democratic primary, flipped the Republican seat, yay, and has been reelected since then in 2020, 2022, and 2024. So I'm done with that. I'm going to turn it over to the Congresswoman for her introduction, and then we're going to get into, you all sent so many questions. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. So with that, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you. I assume when you were clapping for flipping the 11th District of New Jersey, you were clapping for yourselves, because it was here that it all started, and it's so appropriate that I'm here at a town hall, which my predecessor initially, I think, got jammed up because he refused to do that. So it's kind of a full circle moment as we're here today really talking about the future of our state and the future of our nation. I have to tell you, I've, as you've heard, been in public service most of my adult life. I took my first oath to the Constitution when I was 18 years old and entered the Naval Academy. I've taken more oaths than I can recall at this point, although every single one I'm incredibly proud of when I have sworn to protect and defend the Constitution in the Navy, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, in Congress. And I take that really seriously. And I fought hard. I fought hard to drive down costs for people, to push in on mental health for kids, to address the rash of car thefts. And I do all of this because of hearing directly from all of you. What are those things I often say, what's keeping you up at night? What is that last thing as you're trying to go to bed? And it's happened to me. This is why I don't drink coffee after like 10, 11 o'clock a.m. But that thing that's going over and over in your mind, you're just thinking to yourself, that I don't have an answer, I just need to go to sleep, but you can't stop. What is that? And how can I help you? How can I make it so that you can afford your house? You know you can stay here in retirement. Your kids can move back here. How can I help drive down costs for you? How can I help all of you and your families and your children take advantage of the great opportunities here in New Jersey? And finally, at the same time, how can I make sure that you know that despite what's going on in Washington and the attacks we're seeing on so many communities here, that you know here in New Jersey, we're going to push back. We're going to create the community we want to see and the vision for the future. And I say right now when I'm running for governor that there's the Democratic way, there's the Republican way, and there's the New Jersey way. And I say that because, quite frankly, I fought the battle. I impeached the president twice. I tried to hold him accountable for January 6th in every way I knew how, as somebody who was on the floor that day. I talked about how he was bad for the economy of New Jersey, how he was the architect of the court that took down Roe, how he refused to fund the Gateway Tunnel project again and again and again with Infrastructure Week, again and again and again. And yet, at this point, we see that wasn't what connected. And so right now, I'm leading with the ideas of how we can address everyday people's issues. And it was so compelling to people in 2018. But the one thing I don't want people to learn from the last election is that somehow we have to back away from rights and freedoms. Just because we lost the election, I don't think that's the case. I think what we have to do is make sure we're just framing it in the way we want to talk about it. And I'll tell you, we have the newest member of the House of Representatives. One of the newest members is our first trans woman. And they have targeted her from day one. And I was talking to her the other day because I've been so impressed. And she told me, you know, they've been going after me. In fact, I just walked off the floor the other day after the bill on athletes. And they came up to me right away to see what I thought of it. And she said, well, of course I voted against it. But you know what? I just don't see how this is lowering costs for people in Delaware. Right? Let's keep focused on our agenda and the people we serve while not being afraid to back up the vulnerable communities and point out when this administration and Republicans are bullying them. And let's fight hard to win. I'm fighting hard not just to win this primary, but we've got a hard fight on our hands in the general election. Let's win that and prove that this is a blue state, not a red state, not a purple state. This is a blue state, because this is what state that stands up for people. And we can do that. We can do that, and we can make sure that the New Jersey way is the way that leads us to success in this election, creates a blue wave in 2026, and gets us on to 2028 as we chart a different path for this country from what we're seeing in Washington. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to come out today. It is wonderful to see Morris in Sussex County out on a cold morning. It is really a treat to see where we're at after 6 years in this area. A little different from maybe when we started at this, but wonderful to see all of you out today. And thank you so much for taking time to care so much about what's going on in our state, that you're willing to give your time up on a weekend and continue to get out year after year, week after week, month after month, to make sure that your democracy remains strong. So thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, terrific. Okay, so with that, we're going to launch into the questions. And the first one is, what will be your first legislative priority if you become the governor?
So the first thing I really want to address is housing. I have to tell you, it is such a complicated issue right now in New Jersey, and I think we need a fresh perspective and new leadership. We've had affordable housing laws on the books in this state for 50 years plus, and we still have a crisis in housing across the country. And when I say it's important that we win the general, part of it is because we know what Republican leadership looks like. We know Chris Christie didn't fund COA. We know we didn't move forward, so now we're at a crisis point in so many areas. But we also know that there has been, I think, too much of a reliance on what I call what is called in the state builder's remedy. In too many towns, builders suing the town and building in a way that gets us a lot of luxury apartment buildings and just a few affordable housing units. So how can we do better? And part of what I'd like to see is us really thinking more broadly. Let's just not build 3 apartment buildings in towns. Let's think about the areas of the state that we can repurpose. Let's look at places like Fort Monmouth. Let's look at what we're doing in places like Paterson, New Jersey, where the mayor is building homes and old factory buildings that are beautiful. He's doing it around Hinchcliffe Stadium, the only, I think, Negro League stadium left in the country. So let's look at Trenton, New Jersey, which has the capacity to handle about 120,000 people and only has 80,000 people. What does it look like? What do we need to do for communities like that? And I'll tell you why I say this. Because yes, we need to build. But we also have open space issues. We also have wetlands issues. We have flooding issues. And we also have capacity issues. We have towns that are given building mandates and don't have the sewering to do it, an unfunded mandate from the state. So we have places that want to grow, like Atlantic City, that desperately want to grow. So can we push in there and help have a resurgence of some of the towns that historically in our state have really thrived? So these are some of the things I want to look at. How are we going to pay for it? I've been talking to the AFL-CIO that has quite a bit of money that they want to put to work. They're doing it in Nevada. They'd be very interested in doing it in our state and build union, build our schools, build our homes, make sure that we can thrive here in New Jersey so that you can afford that first home. You can afford, when you want to retire and move out of the home you raised your kids in, to stay here. And you can continue to thrive. And I'll just end by saying, I was just talking to a guy who said, we got to make it easier. I have friends who moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I asked them, they were so thrilled to move. They said the cost of living is cheap. So I called them up. I said, how's it going? And they said, not well. There's no public transportation. We're no longer able to drive. There's not a lot to do. And we left all our friends behind. We can do better by people. And we have to do better by people.
Okay, so question number 2, and I might come back to that, the question on affordable housing in a moment. But the next question, and this was, again, all submitted by folks who are here today, what would you say to someone who is worried that you have not served in an executive position before and are now running for governor?
So I think what we need is a fresh perspective. We have for too long just been accepting what's been going on in Trenton, and now we have a state that's just not functioning that well. We are the worst funded state in the nation other than Illinois. We have a New Jersey transit system that is not working well. We are on, I believe we just passed our 3rd summer of hell and counting. Just the other night, when my husband was supposed to be home to pick up the kids and I was in Washington, somebody didn't get picked up. Yeah, he was stuck on the train and I think had to Uber from the city. When we look at what's going on, I really am so impressed that finally, after decades, we have a governor who cares about fully funding our pension system. But that's going to be hard to keep up. We don't have dedicated funds for that. That's a tough one. So how are we going to look at this with new and innovative eyes? And I have to say, it takes leadership. It takes somebody who's willing to take on the status quo, who's willing to find new ideas, and is willing to maybe cross some of the party orthodoxy so we can get better results for people. You know, here we are in a state that we regard as a blue state, I regard it as a blue state, in one of the most diverse states in our nation, a state that I moved to specifically because it was one of the most diverse states in the nation, and yet we have one of the most segregated school systems in the nation. That's a shame. That is, we should all be ashamed of that. So I'll just tell you, these are the things you learn to do. When I was in the Navy, you take on a crisis. When I first ran for office and everything was really difficult in DC, somebody shook their head and said, "You veterans, you're always running right to the fire," right? That's what we do. We solve the tough problems. We take on the tough challenges. We're not going to be stuck in the status quo because we know if you're on a hill and you're getting shot at, if you just sit there and freeze and don't address the problem, you're going to be in big trouble. We need leaders who are willing to take on these tough challenges, and quite frankly, a lot of people who are running in this race have had opportunities to do that for decades and haven't fixed the problems.
Okay, great, thank you. So just going back to affordable housing, and I'm kind of wearing my elected officials hat on this one, but this is the week on Friday when all of the towns have to respond to the State Department of Community Affairs. Every municipality in New Jersey was given a number, well, not every, but most of them, and a lot of the communities and governing bodies are rejecting those numbers, right, and coming back with what we think is more sustainable. So you did touch on this in your first answer, but are there more specifics as to how you can help the communities who they want to do the right thing? They do want to build affordable housing, but they look at these state mandates, and to your point about the luxury projects that end up being built versus what we really want to see is more affordable housing. What specifics can the state offer to help communities get that done and to try to meet these mandates?
Well, that's why I'm sitting down with the AFL-CIO, because they have built houses. They've built workforce housing with union labor. Because look, quite frankly, what they want to see is investing in workers. The people who build the houses should be able to live in the houses they build, right? And here in New Jersey, I don't think we feel like that's happening. So they understand the challenges that states like ours face, which is why, as I was talking to him, I just recently met with him and we're doing some more work together. They have a lot of money under investment, and they want to help us leverage that money. So whether it's federal programs, there's private investments that can come into states, and then is there an area where our state funding can go towards helping match those dollars? So this creates an economy of scale because, like I said, and you know this in working in your town better than I, you guys don't have the money maybe for the sewering. I hear from mayors who say, there's an unfunded mandate. I want to build, but I don't have the sewer capacity. Is the state going to come in and pay for that? Because it would be pretty much half our budget. Mm-hmm. And then trying to weed through that and making good decisions on where we build as well. And then also getting into the states. And yeah, I'm not going to lie. There are towns in Morris County, which, yes, are bad actors in this, right? They don't want to. They don't want to build. We know that. I'm not blind to that. I'm not acting as if it's all roses. But we also have to engage with towns that very much want to build. And we might have mandates for others, but the towns that really want to build and really want to make good decisions, can we figure out those pathways where we can get grant money in to defray the cost of building affordable so we don't need to rely on builder's remedy. So suddenly you don't have a luxury apartment building in the middle of downtown, but rather you have beautiful houses like the program I helped in Madison, where I pushed in some earmarks so we could have beautiful new affordable homes, fully carbon neutral, and something that was really a wonderful opportunity for people because it's also near transportation and grocery stores, which is another key factor. Can we push into Habitat for Humanity, another project I helped fund with congressional funding? So again, we can look at underutilized property, push in beautiful homes, again, near transit, near stores. So we need to have some thoughtful building as we develop out our communities, but it can't end there because that's not going to be enough. Because let's face it, it's not just affordable that we're lacking. We also have to build workforce housing. I mean, we need to build homes that union workers, cops, firefighters, teachers can live in, because otherwise we're going to really start to lose out. I was talking to a police officer who's living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Madison because they have good schools with his 3 kids. Imagine, that's really tough. So you look at other states that can really have an opportunity for people to buy a home with a backyard and a swimming pool in Florida. Would I want to live in Florida? No, I don't want to live in Florida. But if I've got kids, yeah.
That's good to know.
I always like, Florida's always punching us in the state. Like Matt Gaetz is always like, well, when all your New Jerseyans move down to Florida. So I don't mind taking a couple swings, a couple punches for the children. But making sure that we are offering people who want to stay in New Jersey, who want to be able to have their families here, want to be able to have their kids here, that we're offering that first home. Because when I look at it, I served for 10 years in the Navy. There is not 1 year in that service, even as I was getting into my 30s, that I could have afforded the average home price in New Jersey. Good job, good benefits, couldn't afford to raise my family in New Jersey on that salary. So we've got to really push in and create more housing for people in the workforce and affordable housing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
You touched before on the summers of hell that people have been experiencing on NJ Transit. Can you describe more of the plan that you have to improve public transit and NJ Transit specifically?
Yes. So I'll start, because I thought you were going somewhere else. I thought you were going to ask me to describe a summer of hell. So I'm going to do it anyway, because here's what a summer of hell looks like. So my husband, who was an athlete and loved coaching when he did it, loved coaching our kids and really enjoyed it, has not coached my kids for years because he just can't rely on transit. He just can't get home. It's a crapshoot. I've seen, people talking about eating dinner with their families. Man, I wish I could say that was a beautiful vision you could have of my family. That would not be true. Maybe I could make a commercial and make you believe it, but man, that's not happening, right? Because it's dicey with trying to get the kids to their sports, but also not knowing all the time if my husband's going to make it home. The trains aren't running on time, and then you take a summer of hell. It's even worse than that. There was a train that got stopped under the tunnels. The lights went out, the power went out, there was no air conditioning, and oh, by the way, no cell service, and nobody was telling them what was going on for hours. That's what the summer of hell looks like. So I know it's a cute term, summer of hell. It's not a cute experience. And that's why we have to address this. And I'm really frustrated because we have the corporate transit fee, which did not go to transit. This is the kind of stuff we have to stop doing in Trenton. We've got to do better. We don't have dedicated funding for transit, and it's tough to find where to find it because we just have so many things that are not dedicated to those very things that make New Jersey great. So a couple things. First of all, we've got to hold Amtrak accountable. I mean, we pay them an inordinate amount of money to run their tracks, and they are hiding the ball. I have told them a million times it's the catenary wires. They have told me, oh, we don't know what it is. I'm like, well, I know what it is. So I got them $300 million to fix the catenary wires. I'm going to go back to them and find out when that's going to happen. And I can tell you all about catenary wires. They are the overhead wires that sag in the winter if you don't have constant tension wires, which are the new way, and things get caught up in the top and take the whole thing down, and then your system's done. And they sag in the summer and break in the winter unless you have the constant tension ones, which we need. So we're trying to update that. They don't want to do it. They just want to wait and do everything with the Gateway Tunnel project. That's not going to cut it. That's 10 years from now. So A, we have to hold Amtrak accountable and get the federal funding in there, and that's a fight, right? Because states like Arizona oh, you don't need any transit money. I'm like, this is the Northeast, 20% of the nation's GDP. This isn't they try to say, oh, that's a New Jersey, New York problem, you pay for it. No, this is a whole Northeastern regional problem that affects the economy of the United States of America. So we need to push in with our allies in Congress. We need to get more federal funding. And then we also need to come up with how are we going to pay into it. And we need to look at innovative solutions. And I keep saying innovation, and I know it sounds like, oh, what's that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means making sure that we look across the world and realize that nobody is paying for their railroad with commuter fees, right? Nobody's paying for it with ticketing fees. They're paying for it by renting out the land that they own. So getting ratables for restaurants at the train station, for the parking at the train station. That all should be feeding back into transit. That is something, and I'm a little bit worried we've sold off a lot of land recently around transit because we need that to develop the ratables so that that will feed into the transit systems. So that's one of the ways in which we can come up with a more durable way of keeping our costs low and our trains running.
Thank you. Yes. So many people are concerned about the cost of living in New Jersey, and in Congress you have fought to reinstate the SALT deduction. How would you fight as governor to reduce tax burdens for residents of New Jersey?
I fought not to reinstate the tax.
Oh, excuse me.
The cap.
The cap.
I thought, you're right. No, you said it right, to reinstate the deduction. And I'll just quickly, and we're continuing to work hard. I've just turned over some of my legislation to Republicans. They took it down to Mar-a-Lago. Evidently, Trump is shocked that people don't like salt. He would never have done it. The Republicans were explaining to us, they heard in Mar-a-Lago, he would never have done it. And I don't know if they believe that. Yeah, I don't know if they believe that. I don't believe that. But at the end of the day, they're trying to work on how to fix it in reconciliation. And the first attempt of Trump's, I believe, was, I'll move it from 10 to 20. They said that's a no-go. So we have a caucus. We're fighting hard against that. And we'll continue to do that. So here in New Jersey, when we look at costs, when we look at taxes, the number one tax I hear about from people is their property taxes. And that's the one that is really difficult, right? Especially if you're on a fixed income and you're trying to stay in your home and it keeps going up year after year. And so we've got to look at how we are going to address this. And I think we've got to really push in here. And one of the ways, I think, one of the things we have to take a look at is the school administration in some of our very small towns. The administration, the school budget is 60 to 70% of a lot of our town budgets. And we want to keep running a great public school system. It is the best in the nation. It is by zip code, and we have to address that. But we want to keep running a wonderful public school system. So how do we do that? How do we not lower that but still push in? We need to, I think, look at some of those administrators, and can't you have a superintendent that handles more than one school district? Right now you can't. There are laws on the books that say you have to be located in the town you serve. We need to update those laws. We need to make sure that we're sharing it, because just think, you have Montclair, New Jersey, where I live. Our high school is 2,000 kids. The next town over is Glen Ridge. Their high school is 400 kids. They are paying the same administrative for the same administration as we are, so we can get costs down. We have to look at some of the services we use for schools, like insurance services, and making sure that when people go to insurance brokers, they can have an economy of scale and negotiate for more schools than one, use the same person to negotiate those rates and drive some costs down. We can look at firehouses, and this was something Mayor Jorfi had told me, that there are mechanics that work on our fire trucks, and they're private mechanics, very expensive, and each town hires their own. So can we work to have towns work with the same mechanic and get some cost savings there? There are a million different ways we can do this. I'll tell you, it's one of those things that I've been constantly thinking of. We saw that Chris Christie sort of took a sledgehammer to this and had a ton of pushback from towns because he didn't have buy-in. We've seen with the work that Governor Murphy's done, he's largely worked with at the state level not as much at the municipal level and what to do about some of these shared services. But I think we could create buy-in from towns as we're all at kind of the breaking point, because people want great schools, they want great libraries, they want to know the police officers on the street. You want to know your local police officers. But at the same time, the cost of this has become overwhelming. So where are those things that we can share? And I'll end by saying, and it's not moving your elementary school. It's not moving your school. Some people hear this and say, I like my schools in my town. Keep the schools in the town, but focus on, are there administrative costs that we can share with towns in the area?
So this next question is 2 questions. Do you support the Stay in J program that will help seniors age in place in their homes? And do you support continuing the Anchor program or finding other ways to keep the state affordable for seniors?
So I support programs like Anchor and Stay in J that really drive down costs for seniors. But we've really got to look more broadly if we are going to drive down costs and keep services. And that's why I was talking about some of the shared services ideas, some of the ideas of leveraging outside funds to build homes and drive down costs. That is not going to get our state properly funded for the future in isolation. We have to have a broader vision of where we are going to put money and how we are going to continue to move the state forward. I will tell you, if I'm making it sound easy, I would be misleading you. It is tough, right? The pension system at this point costs $7 billion a year to fund because people have not funded it. New York State's pension fund now costs $1.5 billion a year, and it is far larger. We've got to keep funding this so we can keep driving the cost of borrowing down, so we can have a better credit rating, make better investments in our state, but it is going to be tricky. But if we don't do this, we are just kicking the can down the road for our kids. So we owe it to them to do better by New Jersey.
Okay. All right, so we got quite a few questions about the high cost of health insurance. So what can the state do to control the high costs of health insurance and also expand access to health care for those who are either underinsured or uninsured?
So we have some of the highest health insurance costs in the nation. And part of the problem is lack of competition with health insurers. So even though we've added more health insurers, they have actually not had access to all the towns or don't actually cover all the towns in the state. So if you travel the state or if you want to cover large companies that have offices across the state, that's not going to work. We need to make sure they have coverage everywhere. We also know that there are things like looking at site-neutral locations for payment. We have to consider that. Some of those could be problematic in insurers not covering certain things, so we want to make sure people are covered. We also need more transparency in the system. A lot of our systems won't, it could cost a hip replacement could cost one thing in one hospital and be 10 times the cost in another hospital. So we should have more transparency. People have asked about, some states have said, kind of here's the cost of this. I think that could work for things like routine things like hip replacements, knee replacements, that kind of thing, to have that cost set out so we can keep costs down for patients. And then we also have a system where we have self-insurance for the state health insurance plan. It's self-insured. Because of some changes to the state law, now they are able to offer private insurance, and they are driving towns out of the state insurance plan, which I'm really concerned about. It's driven down, towns are happy right now because they've driven down costs. I worry that it's just the initial incentive to get towns to move into this, and costs will be quickly going up. I also worry that it is going to collapse the state health insurance program. So I am looking at how we push into state health insurance, keep those costs down, and some of it are those things that I was just talking about, how we look carefully at controlling costs here, because they are very, very large. There are certain hospitals in New York City that some of the unions have refused to work with anymore because their costs are just so incredibly high.
Thank you. So going back to, you touched on earlier education, and I think everybody in this room at least would agree that all children deserve a high quality education. Yet in New Jersey, as you mentioned, it really is by zip code. It depends where you live. What will you do if you become governor to ensure there's greater education equity across our state?
It's funny, I get asked all the time, and I think it's because many people, put a lot of weight on the fact that when Vice President Harris was asked what she would do differently from Biden, they felt she didn't have an answer. So this is like the test of the cycle, right? What would you do differently from Murphy? And what do you like about Murphy? And so I think there's both things, right? I talked about transit that I would want to do differently. I want to fund the state differently. I want to build more houses. I would say, though, his focus on early childhood education, I think, is game-changing for families. I really do, and very important. So first of all, if I were governor, I would work hard to end, I think there's very few left, but work hard to end those districts that don't have full-day kindergarten. That just, when we know the first 5 years of life is so critically important to kids, I mean, that to me is just, that's just losing out already in those towns for the expectations of the children. It's also really hard on parents. When you're a working parent, what are you going to do if you drop your kid off and school's over at noon? What is the program you're going to, there's not a lot of jobs that, are 3-hour jobs or 4-hour jobs. So it's really a hardship. We also, I will also tell you that I have been shocked at all the studies that I've seen over time about how critically important 3- and 4-year-old education is. You wouldn't think it, right? I was talking to somebody, I was in criminal justice reform. I helped start the state's first federal prisoner reentry program when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so I would talk to a lot of people involved in criminal justice reform, and I asked one woman, I said, what would you do to break the school to prison pipeline? And I thought she'd say, after school basketball, or longer school days, or, jobs programs in the summer, and all of those are good things. But she said, Head Start. She said, you would be shocked. You would be shocked at the return on investment that we get for 3- and 4-year-olds in a great quality education program. And I'm not sure I believed it. I sort of was like, that's interesting. I will tell you from my own children have had very different experiences. 2 of them, my older 2, were in a preschool that was lovely. They were very happy. It was they called it a child-centered program. So I said, do you have like a letter of the day or number of the day? They're like, well, if the kids want it. My kids didn't want it. They arrived in kindergarten. They maybe knew their uppercase letters. They did not know the lowercase letters. They were already behind. And I am not kidding you. I think that set them on a different path than my younger 2 who were in daycare. It was a great daycare program. It was pretty traditional. They did their letters. They, did their numbers. They did their, it was just a very traditional, and I will tell you, they just were set up for success on day 1 when they entered. It's just a personal experience, a very different outcome. So that's why I have been so impressed that is the focus, that we have free pre-K in so many different areas. I'd love to continue to expand that. The flag I will have is that it upends our model for infant care. Generally in daycare, the 3- and 4-year-olds pay for the infants. Infant-based care, which is one of the most important times if you're a working parent and you're trying to get back to work, is very expensive. In about half the states in this nation, it is more expensive than in-state college tuition. So that's what parents are facing. We have to defray the cost of that. I have a piece of legislation in Congress with Elizabeth Warren in the Senate that nobody should pay more than 7% of their income on child care. If we could implement that, we would get over $1 billion back into people's pocket in New Jersey as people were able to enter the workforce. It is a huge hit on parents, the lack of child care. And I'll end by telling you that I really think of this as a personal issue, because if I was not able, and I I struggled. You know, you have your kid, you're sort of reeling because, you know, it's a very different experience, and then you go to sign them up for daycare, and either there's a wait list until they're 2, or they don't take kids until they're 2, and suddenly you're like, I gotta go back to work in a couple months. That's not gonna, you know, what am I gonna do? The cost is exorbitant. I have paid more in childcare than I have made at work. But if I'd made a different decision, we know from the numbers that if a woman steps out of the workforce for 5 years, that could be a 20% hit on average to her lifetime earnings. If you're a single mom, that impacts your whole family. I think I am in Congress because I didn't choose to do that, and it was really 50-50 a lot of times. So this is a huge issue for our state. I think we need to continue to grow what the governor has done, and we also need to make sure that some of the people running our daycares can get their certifications while they are working so that we can defray the cost of getting people into the workforce as well, into the child care workforce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's happening all over the state, but Sussex and Morris counties are under pressure for warehouse development. How would you balance the need to protect our open space, but also help business growth?
This is another area where local rule has been so difficult. So if you go down to Allentown, New Jersey, they have a downtown area. They've had some flooding issues. They have a housing area right by the downtown, and then they have fields. There have been some Revolutionary War relics found in the fields. It's not a preserved historical site, but they regard it as a gem in the neighborhood. But the field is in Upper Freehold. And so Upper Freehold doesn't want the warehouse, but they want the ratables. So they have chosen to put the warehouse as close to Allentown as possible, which happens to be about 100 meters from the backyards of a community that is currently facing a field. There is a belief that this will flood the homes as they build this warehouse. I was told that the town has 1 engineer, the developers have at least 5. And so they have put forward saying no. However, they've said no, that it won't flood. But it seems as if, according to Allentown, that if it does flood, there's going to be no remedy for them. They can't hold them accountable. So this is why, I mean, as if I had to, I think you guys understand it, but this is one of the reasons why this has been such a difficult problem and why we need a statewide strategy on warehouses. I just think these warehouses and the logistics centers came to New Jersey so quickly that we have not had time to take a step back and come up with a strategic plan. So I've been in touch with the Department of Environmental Protection about this. They said that it was going to take some time for this particular warehouse, but that's going on all across the state. I know very well in Sussex County. It did help us flip a town, so there was that. But we need a statewide strategy for this and to put it in place so that these towns aren't beholden just to the whims of the town next door. So that's what I would work on as governor, is a statewide strategy and some rules around how you build these warehouses.
Thank you.
I'm going to combine a couple questions because we're almost running out of time here. So we're going to have to talk about the elephant in the room, unfortunately. What will you do as governor to protect New Jersey residents from the harm of the new administration? And sadly, we had an example this week, this horrible ICE raid at a restaurant in Newark. No doubt more to come. So 2 parts. One is, how will you push back against that, if you become governor? And specifically, do you support passage of the New Jersey Immigrant Trust Act to provide safety and stability during the next 4 years?
Thanks. So I don't know if I said this in my opening comments, but I expected this to be bad, and it is worse than I expected. I just was saying that to our Democratic leadership when I was down there in Washington. I said, this, and we've all been through it, right? Like, this is not the first time I've been in office in a Trump administration, but the speed with which this has come some of it even before he was in office, now immediately the executive orders, the collapsing of any dissent in the Republican Party as usual. But I don't know why, it's like Lucy in the football. You always think, well, maybe, like with Pete Hegseth, well, maybe just one more person, maybe Tillis. But it has truly been horrible. And we are feeling it, as I told you, in my own school, we're feeling it reverberating throughout all of our community. And so there has been a complaint in Newark that there was no warrant and that it violated the Fourth Amendment. So we've gone to the governor's office to get more information. They're tracking information. I went down to the Judiciary Committee. I've asked them to pull the tapes because I believe the ICE officers have cameras so we can understand exactly what happened, because a warrantless search and seizure violates the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. And I, as governor, would, I've taken more oaths, as I told you, to the Constitution. I'm not going to stop upholding them now. I believe in the Fourth Amendment. I believe in the 14th Amendment. I would uphold the Constitution of the United States as governor, and then continue to work to make sure that we have a space where people know that, they can go to get services that they need, if they need to report something to the police, they're not going to be arrested. Or if their kids are in school, they're not going to send their kids off to school and never see them again. I mean, these are some of the things we're grappling with in New Jersey, and those are some of the protections in the Immigrant Protection Act. And so there are a lot of things. I was just talking to the speaker last night about a lot of this stuff is being done by the executive order by the governor. So I was just talking to the Speaker of the Assembly last night about what Trenton is moving forward on and what we are going to put into legislation, and how we are going to make sure that people in this community feel that they are fully part of our community, and again, create that different pathway forward than what we're seeing coming out of Washington.
So it sounds like you do support passage of the act?
I support many parts of it. Okay. I want to see what they want to actually pass, but I have supported many parts of it.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Back over to yep.
How important do you think it is for Democratic politicians to loudly and publicly refute Trump's false claims and narratives? And what plans do you have as governor to get other governors in the region to speak with one voice to Congress and the president?
I think about this all the time, because as I told all of you, I did it one way, it didn't work, right? We now have Trump back in office. And so to me, it would be sort of the definition of insanity to just keep plowing ahead, because we've got to win. We have got to win this governor's race. It's critical. It's more critical than any probably governor's race we've had in New Jersey, because we don't have the presidency, the Senate, or the House, which is bad enough. But the real blow is we don't have the courts. We don't have that federal protection that we've looked to for now decades as Democrats to protect basic rights and freedoms. So we have to retrench in state power, and this is the first race across the nation, along with Virginia, where we can stand up and show a different pathway forward and get buy-in. So I think it is going to be important to stand against the policies coming from Washington, but I don't think that's going to be enough. We have got to define our pathway forward. So yes, when we are seeing things coming out of Washington, like stripping away all of our infrastructure money that has been legally appropriated by Congress and signed into law by the president, then we stand up. We can take the administration to court. We can continue to move forward on policies here to protect citizens here, and we have to do that. But we can't stop talking about how we have a better vision, how we are going to work to actually drive costs down. We are going to work for working people. We're going to make sure that you have opportunity, that we're driving down affordability, and that we're protecting rights and freedoms. And if we lose sight of that, I'm afraid we're not going to win. And I have to say, I remember I was listening to James Carville, And I don't always agree with him. When I was listening to this podcast, I was probably like 50-50 in what he said. But the one thing, and this was right after the election when we just lost, the one thing he kept saying is winning is everything. And it's true. Because as Democrats, when we don't win, vulnerable people suffer. So I will just say that it's not just the fact that I want to win this primary. Because sometimes in New Jersey, that would be enough, right? We might win a Democratic primary. But we know with what's going on in this state, we've got to win that general election. We have to make a case to people, not just all of us in this room. That might be easy. We have to make a case to people. And I think all of you know how we do it. This is a town, this is a county, this is a place where we have had to build from the ground up. This isn't a place where we kind of roll in and we're like, hey, look, I'm a Democrat. And as Nancy Pelosi has said about some districts, a glass of water with a D in front of it wins, right? This is a place where we've had to connect with people. We've had to bring people into the fold. We've worked across the aisle to deliver on things like flooding and car theft bills and mental health support because we want to show we're delivering. And so what does that look like in Morris County? Well, I can tell you, when I first got into office, I would show up at things like 9/11 ceremonies, and Kelly Doucette, who was my district director at the time, and I would walk in together, largely be ignored. We would park very far away, walk over, sit in the back of the room, and then someone would grudgingly say, and our congresswoman's here. And I would smile and wave, and people would be like, Now, and I think Amal, you can attest to this too, because she's been at some of the same things as she's started to be brought in. Now, I'd still maybe be stretching it if I said I had a parking spot. But I have a seat at the table. I am recognized. People want to get in a picture with me. And that is because they know I'm delivering, and they know their constituents know I'm delivering. That is how we build the broad base of support, because I am telling you, after this race is over, I don't want there to be any question. I don't want somebody to say, I think New Jersey's a red state. I don't want somebody to say, I think New Jersey's a purple state. I want everybody to know that New Jersey is undeniably a blue state, and this is where we build back here. And I want reserved parking.
I'm trying to decide. Do you have time for like 2 more questions? I think it's almost 5 o'clock.
Probably, right? I think.
All right. Well, I think
Maybe
you
one more?
answered one of the questions, which was, if you become the nominee, how will you defeat the Republican candidate? I feel like you just answered that question, so we'll skip that one. But here's another one. If you are not the Democratic nominee, will you support whoever wins the primary?
The Democrat, yes, of course I will. Yeah. Yeah, we got to win this one.
All right. Well, with that, any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't ask you about as we close up today? I thought, thank you for taking the time, and thank you to everybody who sent in questions. We obviously didn't get to all of them, but hopefully you heard some of your questions being asked. Tried to consolidate questions as well, and maybe we can do this again at a future point, because there were some topics I'd love to dive in deeper on.
Yeah.
As an elected official. But anyway, any final thoughts that you have?
Well, thanks. I guess I'll just make my final pitch, if you guys don't mind. First of all, this room, among all others, this feels like sort of ground zero for my political career, if you will. And it was because of so many people in this room that I was able to have the largest red to blue flip in the entire nation in 2018. And I have continued to build on that. And so despite the fact that there are at least 6 districts in this state that have more Democrats than the 11th District of New Jersey, in every election except that 2020 vote by mail election, I've been the largest Democratic vote getter in this state. Thanks. Again, I feel like you guys should be clapping for yourselves because so many people help me with the canvassing. I've been in Judy Hernandez's yard more times than I've been in my own, I think. But we've worked incredibly hard to build that support cycle after cycle after cycle. We deliver services to people. I tell, when people say, what's the secret to your success in elections? I say ruthless competence. Our casework went up 700% over COVID. We were often told, you are the only people we can get on the phone right now. And that is a tribute to the hard work of the people on my team who don't get paid a lot of money and heard some really heartbreaking stories. And I was really worried about mental health issues as we were doing it, but really wanted to push in and serve people. That's the ethos, and that's what I want to develop across the state. I win with the largest Democratic vote share. I always beat the top of the ticket in my district, no matter who's at the top. And I also overperform in my town that is 70% Latino, one of the, by percentage, the most Latino towns in the state. I overperform there. And I also win with over 60% of the swing vote and then about a quarter of registered Republicans. And I think that's what it's going to take here. And so I would love to earn your endorsement. I would love to earn your support. I'd love to earn your vote. And thank you all so much for having me today. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody.